Congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Exciting, isn't it? Yeah, it's amazing.
yeah, it's amazing. You did it again. I mean, it really is always an accomplishment, isn't it? Don't you feel that way when you're
No,
when you're
right.
writing?
When you first get a copy of your book,
Hmm.
it's like all over again. You're like, this is amazing.
Yes.
What an extraordinary thing to get to do.
Yep, you did it. Well, and this one feels like you. I mean, maybe you feel like they all do, but I don't know. I feel like this one feels like you.
That's what everybody keeps telling me. Pete Rollins told me, he's like, this is your most personal book. And I was like, the book with the least
I,
amount of stories and
yes.
such. And he was like, no, you don't understand. This is your most personal book.
Yeah, I think that too. Like it's not you're not hearing the stories of Rob or your marriage or your faith, your life, but it's got your. I mean, people who've known you, I think, would say, yeah, this is the kind of stuff that I talked to Rob about, or this is sort of that way, or that Rob Bell effect on me is happening as I'm reading these chapters or thinking about this book or that kind of thing. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Thank you. Fascinating.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of questions, but I'm, I like to talk to people in these kinds of situations for the podcast and the live stream about like what was going on with you when you were making this book. So that's why that introduction is a big deal. And you are by your own admission in the introduction, you're a sermon giver. I don't know if you like the word preacher or teacher or
Sure.
co-learner
I'll take it.
or talker. And and your relationship to the Bible seems to be still rooted for you in what that means for you to be someone who wants to talk about your life or your spirituality or your faith. But I think
Yes.
some people would be a little surprised. I think they would think, when Rob stopped having to be in the church context and got to be in a larger context of the people that he was able to talk with and speak to and listen to
Yeah.
and be in conversation with, he probably would drop the Bible because the Bible was probably the thing he was using because he was in the church context.
Oh, right, right, right. And instead it went the other direction.
Yeah,
And I'm like never in churches or religious settings.
right.
And people love the Bible stories. And I'm talking about people who are deeply opposed and resistant to anything like the word Bible,
Right.
let alone, good Lord, the word Christianity. I'm in settings where you say that and they're like, and the door is that way.
Yes, right.
So actually the book came out of me owning my tradition. I mean, you and I know, I mean, the word radical comes from the Latin radix, which means root.
Right.
The radical is not the person who wandered off into the deep weeds. It's the person who went back to source. And this library of books is so badass. It's anybody's like, oh, why is Bernie Sanders connecting with the youth? Because he's mainlining Amos. You know what I mean? Mother Mary, when she finds out she's going to have a baby, that is the first Rage Against the Machine album. Man and the powers are coming down. I mean, you know what I mean? These impulses, these expressions that to feel like life-giving and radical and subversive to people, you can go back to this library of books and find every one of them. Aesthetics, design, architecture, care for creation, women being free to be who they are here to be. Yeah, it's all there.
So here's what I think a lot of people will be thinking as they hear you say that. Well, you can find that in there, Rob Bell, or maybe a couple other kind of master teachers. But I tell you, I'm reading this thing like just in English with what I bring to the story, and I am not able to find my way through those through the rest of it to find that stuff.
That's why I wrote the book. That's why I wrote the book. And that's why this is not a book about what the Bible says.
Yes.
Because most books about the Bible are, I'm going to boil it down for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You and I know the people who write the book. It's like, I'm going to tell you what it really... No. I'm not trying to tell you what it says. I'm trying to read it with you.
Yeah.
I'm trying to show you a way to read it that will be endlessly fascinating and compelling and convicting and dangerous forever.
Well, and you actually, for people who haven't had a chance to read the book yet, you actually do that in the first two, maybe three sections of the book. Like you say, instead of saying like, here's the way to read the Bible differently, because your thesis at the start is you want people to read the Bible in a new way. And instead of saying, here's the 4 steps to reading it a new way, you just launch in and start doing it.
Moses has an erection, chapter 1.
I was gonna ask you to start with the moisture of Moses. I'm glad there's a little bit in that section where you say something about like, okay, you get it, like he has an erection. The whole point about Moses's death description is him losing his strength, is he has an erection. I'm glad you point. I was sort of skim reading, like you do when you pick up a new book, and it hadn't settled into me that tightly yet, that story hadn't settled in. So I'm glad you sort of pointed that out, because even I was missing that. I'd never heard that before at all. So you do this thing. So talk a little bit about that story. Okay, can you do that? Can you talk a little bit about that story and what you're trying to do in helping people to read the Bible in a new way by using the death of Moses story from the book of Genesis?
Oh, right. Yeah. So, so what I wanted in the book, nothing's worse than a sermon about the Bible. You know what I mean? No, seriously, it's relevant.
Maybe a book about the Bible, yeah.
Just show me what you're talking about. Let me be caught up in whatever you're caught up in. So the book begins with Deuteronomy 34, when Moses dies, he's old and full of strength, which is just odd, because generally when you die, it's because you don't have strength. But the actual Hebrew word there, lecho, means moisture. So he dies full of moisture. And you have all these fascinating rabbinic interpretations. Yeah. He died, but he hath not become wrinkled. It's a euphemism for sexual potency. So it's literally like the great Hebrew liberator when he died, everybody, just to let you know, he could still get it up. Yeah, which is really interesting, because the storyteller wants you to know this is about actual liberation from enslavement. Moses led people out of darkness into light, out of enslavement into freedom and liberation. And the invitation then was to create a new kind of people who would extend this liberation to the world. So it's about a tribe. It's about what every human being longs for. And it's like the writer wants you to know. And in the ancient world, of course, your ability to have kids was your ability to build a new kind of tribe, to build a new kind of nonviolent world where people were being liberated from whatever they need to be liberated from. So in this one little thing, you have like these concentric circles. And it's a very brilliant Jewish way to say, hey, our old boy, he was still in the game.
Yeah, like what it took to free the people didn't take all the life from him. It's that this is a life-giving narrative, right? Not a life sucking, not a life-taking narrative.
It's about carrying this intoxicating idea of liberation on to the next generation. It's like kind of racy and raunchy and hopeful, and it's got all this stuff stacked on top of it, because the Bible is a book about soil, wine, sex, land, dirt, sweat, conflict, empire. It's like a sticky, earthy. Because for many people, the Bible is like, here's how you get out of here.
Okay, so why is it that you think most people who, when they hear you say that, they're like, is he talking about like the Hebrew Bible and the Christian Bible? Is that the one he's talking about? Because they don't experience that. So what is it you think that keeps so many of us from experiencing that when people have spent time in the Bible? Because some people who are most tired of it are those who've spent the most time in it.
Absolutely. And in one of the chapters, like when I talk about why Americans often miss the central themes of the Bible, this is a book written by a minority group of people who had been conquered by one global military superpower after another. They've been on the receiving end of violence from the Egyptians, the Seleucids, the Persians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, the Romans by the time of Jesus. So these people are deeply suspicious of coercive military power and the misuse of power. Because if you've been conquered over and over again, chariots and tanks to you and F-14 fighters don't make you want to watch football.
So the Bible's not a make Israel great again kind of narrative?
So what's interesting then is if you are a citizen of a global military superpower reading a book about the subversion of superpowers, you may have to spiritualize a lot of these texts, because otherwise they're about you. What does America have? 700 military bases. 43% of the world's weapons are owned by 5% of the world's population. So
you don't really want to be saying, find yourself in the story of the United States of America. That's
exactly. You think about it. If you just, at a most basic level, read this book, it's written from a perspective. And if you read it as an American, you're reading it all due respect and love for our home country, but you may have to spiritualize it, because otherwise you're going to have to take seriously what it's saying about power, empire, money, a gap between the rich and poor, the use of coercive military action, and I mean, obviously Jesus is not killed because he was nice. He's killed because he threatens an industrial, religious, economic system that kept some people rich and some people poor. And that's all sitting right there.
So I know a lot of people who would say amen to all that. I want the Bible to be the narrative by which I get to critique the empire that I find myself in, but they're still not reading it as a gritty, dirty, in the dirt kind of racy, human passion story. Because a lot of us have been told the Bible from beginning to end is about God. And I bet you've heard that. I bet there's even been times in your life where you may have thought that, or you believe someone who told you that this is a God story from beginning to in the beginning. So God created, and at the end, the thrones of the Lamb are at the footstool of God, and like it's God from beginning, it's God from end.
Say it without sort of being like on the footstool.
Did you see that? I was just hitching on it. I couldn't, and I thought I kind of was losing it too. But you know what I'm getting at that, and then. You seem to say, no, this is a story about people and passions and places and land and all of those other things. So do you think there's something that people have to be open to setting aside, not just a nationalistic narrative, but something for Bible people, like who
you have to begin with the human, whatever divine you're going to experience in this library of books. It will begin with the human, because that's how this book works. It did not drop out of the sky. Actual people wrote it. So you have to begin there. And I mean, you think about the name Israel, the word means struggle. So it's a struggle. And then when people say, well, it's about God, which God? Elohim? Yahweh. I mean, the first name for God in the beginning of Genesis is Elohim, which is a plural word in the Hebrew. So Elohim, El Shaddai, Yahweh, Theos, Jehovah Jireh, like even those simple sort of, well, it's about God. It's about people giving God lots of different names because they're struggling and wrestling with the absence of God, the presence of God. You think about Jesus on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? This is the day God became an atheist. I mean, this book is as much about the absence of the divine presence. The book of Lamentations is 5 poems about where were you? Or you think about the Psalms, half of the Psalms are laments. Why do you hide your face? So this idea that it's a confident, bold, God is with you no matter what. A number of these stories are stories about people saying, God, where the hell are you?
Yeah.
Which now we have a book that actually can help us.
Now you have you
human experience.
In I think section 4 of the book, you take on a set of questions that a lot of people have about the Bible. So it's sort of like you make this 3-part move to show, or 2 or 3-part move to show people how it could be. And then you sort of grant, okay, look, there's probably some hanging questions that you have, which felt to me like you were wanting to take those on directly as stones in the shoe kind of thing. And one of them, I
pictured it like a live event. Like if I stopped there at the end of the 3 movements, what would people immediately, if they had a Bible background? Obviously, the first part of the book is if you've never read this, or if it's for everybody. But I had pictured what would people ask, and then that's where it came from.
And the question that so many people I know ask, and I ask all the time, is how do you reconcile the violence narratives that seem to be embedded in the stories of people and God and all that? Do you want to say something about that, or do you just want to say that you answer the question and people should buy a copy of What is the Bible to get to it? Sort of Deepak Chopra, like,
yeah. Well, it's fascinating. I mean, there's lots of different answers to the question, which I give you lots of different ways to think about this. One of the most obvious is just to ask people, the Hebrew scriptures, the Old Testament, where was it edited together? And it's fascinating to me, like you said, the people who've lived the most with the Bible, when you ask them who edited it together, will be like Paul, God, I don't know. It was edited together in Babylon. Why were they in Babylon? Because they'd been conquered again and hauled away into exile by a people who conquered the world in the name of their God. So when these people then edit together a series of stories about people conquering in the name of their God, they may be doing a Quentin Tarantino here. Quentin Tarantino doesn't think that violence is the answer to every problem, but in his movies, man, violence happens a lot. And it's almost like Quentin Tarantino was spoofing it. He's going, do you see the futility of violence? So one read would simply to be these people who have been on the receiving end of violence, like the book of Judges. The book of Judges isn't God is violent. The book of Judges is an editor putting together these stories saying, do you realize that violence isn't solving anything?
Right.
That it's the pattern in Judges. So when the hardcore person who thinks the Bible is the problem and the hardcore fundamentalist both say, yep, God is violent, they're both misreading the Bible because they're missing a larger pattern, which is very clever on the part of the storyteller, which is, I'm going to show you violence that never goes anywhere and is pointless and cruel to point out how pointless and cruel violence is.
All right, so let me just be that guy in the back of the room that raises, at the live event, raises the hand and says, well, but there's this select number of times, just enough to be really troubling, where get them all says the Lord.
Yes. So I would begin with everybody in the ancient Near East conquered in the name of their God.
Okay.
So you go in, you slaughter everybody, you rape the women, you kill all the children, then you take all the donkeys and camels back with you, and you did it in the name of your God. So why does it surprise us that a group of stories from that time and that place exist in which people tell stories about conquering in the name of their God? The idea of God is an evolving concept in the Bible. And people had earlier understandings that the gods are violent and you conquer in the name of your God. So actually the power of embracing the humanity is you go, oh, this actually shouldn't be that surprising that people told stories like they told stories. What's interesting is that mixed in among those stories, you have leave a corner of your field for the widow, the orphan, and the immigrant. Or Leviticus 19, love your neighbor, which is how human evolution works. You're a mess, and then you get like a little shard of light that gets through. I mean, think about people's individual lives. Did you suddenly become awesome overnight? Well, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, other than you, that was a rhetorical
for the listeners.
But what's funny is when we think about our own progress, it's 2 steps forward, it's 1 step back. We're a mess, and we get like one little breakthrough. And the Bible, in many ways, is a macro version of the micro version of progress that we all encounter all the time. You used to talk like an idiot. I did too. You know what I mean? Because that's how people talked about that subject or whatever it is.
So as you say in the book, you've been a preacher for more than 25 years. You've said a lot of things in front of people about a lot of topics. Does the Rob Bell of 2017 ever look back at the Rob Bell of 1995 or something and think like, oh my, I just wish I could pull all of those things back.
Interesting.
That I had said. Like, how do you deal with the?
Actually, the Bible helped me make sense of this. That the whole thing is unfolding and it's heading somewhere. And an integral whole approach to life is that was that. To beat myself up over the earlier things is to miss the joy that I'm not there. I'm sure you meet people who are just so angry with whatever, the tribe, the community they came out of, and I will just say to them, are you still there? No, man, I left that crap. Then are you grateful that you're not stuck back there thinking those things? Yes, of course I'm grateful. Then why did you come to me looking constipated?
Live in gratefulness.
Among the mystics, repentance is a joyful thing, or a turning of the mind, or a opening of the heart, or enlightenment wasn't something where you kept beating yourself over why I used to think that way. You're so grateful that now you see it this way.
Well, was there a point for you in sort of your own narrative where you were you don't seem like you're afraid of the Bible now, and you don't seem like you need to back away from it. You seem like you're willing to interact with it as a as a gift and as a real contribution. Was there a point where you were noticing things happening in you and your own thinking and the people around you that you thought, I just don't think I'm going to be a Bible person, when I'm 64? Did you fear that at all, or have you stayed?
There were times when I wondered, oh, does this like Ram Dass talks about how a lineage can catapult you beyond it. That's its goal, is to catapult you into the infinite. And I would think, oh, does this at some point just catapult you into a tradition-less space? But then I came to realize, no, you need a lineage. You need a tradition. And all the wise ones, the yogis, the gurus, they all speak to the value of a tradition, to a path, to symbols, to rituals, to a sacred text. The problem isn't the text. The problem is when the text fails to throw you forward and it actually holds you back.
Is that what you were getting at when you say in the beginning of the book that you want people to read the Bible in a new way, not just think different, just not just make different conclusions about it? Are you saying you want it to function in people's lives in a different way?
Absolutely. You have to hold it differently. I'll even, somebody asked the other day, like, well, what do you do when you don't agree with something that you read in the Bible? Then you set down the idea that the point of reading the Bible is to decide what you agree with and disagree with. Talk about a way to rob it of all of its sacred power. Right. I don't know, is to stand in judgment of it. Well, I don't know if that measures up to because you're so wise. It's like standing there going, I don't know if I like this song. Tell you what, stop wondering whether or not you like the song and join us on the dance floor. It's so much more fun on the dance floor. So a lot of Christians that you're speaking of, a lot of religious people are literally wondering whether or not they like the song. And that is never the point of the music in the first place.
So I've been deeply affected by people who've said to me, it's been very helpful, you're one of them, that if one tries to endeavor into any kind of spiritual practice totally on your own with your self-reference point, it's not going to be as meaningful for you as it is if you're in a community of people. So the Bible especially should be read in a community of people. And you make a big point in the book to say, the Bible is not a Christian book. It's really not even a Jewish treasure only. It's a human book.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
How that being the case, for a lot of people, religious communities, synagogues or mosques for Muslims or Christians in churches, that's the communal structure that they want to read the Bible and interact with the Bible in. But a lot of people just, of all those traditions, they just can't do it in those structures anymore. Do you have any thoughts about how you think people who want to read the Bible differently are going to find ways to do that? If being in those
right. Well, the other night, my friend Pete Holmes, he has a show on HBO called Crashing.
He's a funny guy.
We have a 2-man show that we do, and Monday night at this club here in West Hollywood, I'm gonna show you Pete the Bible. I essentially laid out for him a new Exodus theology with him giving running commentary on it in a club on a Monday night, and he turned out he was high. So he began by saying, you know what, honestly, I'm a 10 out of 10 high. And he gave high commentary on a significant new Exodus theology reading of Egypt, Sinai, Jerusalem, Babylon, all the way into Jesus comes to bring us a new Exodus. So that would be my answer is I take...
Find a high world-class comedian that you can hang around with and do a show with them.
So an example would be... well, you think right now, how do you maintain a firm center when the people with their hands on the wheels of government may be completely insane? Lots of people are asking this question, and you have a book, like over 1,000 pages, that is about how do you maintain a firm center when the powers that be are aligned against goodness and decency. The question that millions of people around the world are asking is one of the fundamental things. You know what I mean? So I would just say to people, have the balls to talk about what this book actually talks about because inevitably you will discover that this is what people are talking about in the world right now.
It sounds like some of what you're saying is that it requires a kind of irreverence that your commitment to a religious tradition might not always encourage in you. Like to say that you and a comedian at a club or when it was high, that's got an irreverent feel to it, but it also opens a freedom for the narratives, for the stories, for the teachings to sort of do their thing.
I should be. I mean, to be totally honest with you, I've spoken. I mean, years ago, I talked in a church every Sunday. I talked at Christian events. Those shows with Pete are some of the most reverent, holy things I've ever been a part of. And I say that because people come up afterwards and they're like, I don't know what just happened, and people will say, I grew up in church and I never experienced something that transcendent. Because some of the things is he immediately begins dropping his F-bombs. And what's interesting is like it pokes a membrane and a whole spirit of pretension and pretending leaves the room. It's like, oh, this is one of those spaces. And if I were to like rely on any cliches or any language, it's like insider language, it would, all you have is the raw, does this bring life or not? And the thing about religious communities is you can get away with murder, bad sermons, literally, cliches. You can get away with talking about something that you have not actually tasted. And people, well, you know what? He's being true to the Bible. He's lying. She's talking about something she is not smoking what she's selling. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Or you think about the recent election and people who are like losing their jobs because they talked about Trump. How had a religion form around somebody who was executed as an enemy of the state, in which people who claim to be true to that tradition say, we can't talk about the state?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
How about that?
That's backwards.
All right. So thank you. So two last things. Two last things. This is a substantial book for a Rob Bell book. Let me just be clear about that. This is one of your longer tomes. And there's a couple little treasures at the back. So, like a lot of people who read Genesis and then the book of Revelation, I may have done something like that. So a little bit at the beginning, a little at the end. And there's two parts in here that I think are interesting. One is this little end point where you have a note on growing and changing. Yeah. That little, I don't know, it's not even a full page and a half, I think. It's really personal from you. Like, can you say something about how that got in there, or say you can talk about what's in that little section? But why did you include it, and at what point did you think about writing that bit and including it in the book?
Yeah, I've been doing that bit live for a couple of years because families, towns, cities, political parties, businesses, industries, family systems, churches have a center of gravity of consciousness. How everybody sees it, and if you grow, if you expand, if you listen and pay attention and hear, you might move beyond. You might begin to see things that the people around you don't see. And once you see, you can't unsee. Once you taste, you can't untaste. Yeah. And what a lot of people were never taught is, especially in the Jesus tradition, is if you are true to the Jesus path, you may find yourself at odds with your tradition, and you might find yourself at odds with a number of people who say that they're the ones who are in with the Jesus tradition. Yeah. And once again, they killed Jesus. So this is how the story goes. Yeah. And the reason why institutions don't talk about this is because institutions are fundamentally bent towards their own self-preservation. We can't have you reading that book. We can't have you talking about those ideas. That disrupts. But disruptions are actually how consciousness expands. So when I talk about this, the suffering and the cost of growth, it's fascinating how many people totally resonate and know this is true, and yet haven't ever heard this. So that's what that's there for. Yeah.
Well, it's very gracious. It's really great.
Wonderful.
Thank you. That and the section that comes just before it, books about the Bible that will blow your mind. It's a nice little, I mean, it's a nice little bibliography. And I have some friends that will love to see that Jürgen Moltmann's The Spirit of Life is there. And
Is that book not the greatest?
I mean,
Oh,
that's,
don't even get me started.
that's, so there might be two books on the Bible you should think about buying.
Absolutely.
This one and that one. Rob, what anything you're hoping for this book? I'm sure there's all the Rob Bell fans that are going to pick it up anyway. Is there somebody in particular that you'd like someone to buy 2 copies, one for themselves?
What's interesting is actually the reason why I put the book together is my friends who have never gone to church and want nothing to do with any of this, who are like, dude, that stuff on the Bible, you gotta like write all that down. So I have a couple friends in particular who are like, whether there's a God or not, whatever, but when you do that Bible stuff, that's cool. So actually what sort of spurred it was friends who have no horse in this race.
Yeah.
But
Nice.
like you're at a dinner party and they're like, wait, what's that thing you were talking about the other day? And I'll be like, oh, eschatological realism. That's the idea that so yeah, all the people who have dismissed this book, which are all across the spectrum, it's done something deep and profound and is still doing it. And that's the same. The other thing, of course, is that I'll come to your city and we'll say hi.
It's worth it all right there. If you got to write a book just to come and say hi. Hey, speaking of that, you're on tour. You're going to be hitting up a bunch of cities. You're going to be in Minneapolis in May. You're hitting some other metropolises, I'm sure.
Yes.
People can come and find you and hear you do versions of the Bible, or what is the Bible? Is that
Talk
what you're
a little
going to
bit
do?
about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
Hey, congratulations, my friend. It's a great book.
You're a good man.
It's
Always
really
great to
good.
talk to you.
Yeah, really good talking with you. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.